Coming up on That's a Great Point.
I feel like that's a different direction than y'all took, but it's the truth that as far as the biggest impact and positive change and changes in my life. Sorry, I'm not a pretty crier. But that's where they started.
I think you're a beautiful crier. That was beautiful.
More validation, thank you.
So beautiful.
Validation from this corner of the screen as well, Tanya.
I think being moved to tears for profound life changes is a beautiful thing. It's gratitude. It's love. It's beautiful.
Hey, neighbor. On today's episode, we're talking about loops, both habit loops and thought loops. Why do we repeat the same patterns over and over again when we know deep down that we need to change? What does it take to break out of these habit loops? The heart of coaching is behavior change, and you're about to get a glimpse into how that works. If you find our content helpful, please like and subscribe so others can find us more easily. Thanks for playing along. Enjoy. Welcome to That's a Great Point, the attitude adjustment for your soul, where co-hosts Alina Doran, Michelle Aalbers, and Lee Smart discuss deep topics around a life well lived. Let's start the show. I can't help but notice how much more difficult it is to wear headphones now these days with the invent of all this convenience technology.
Old school
Convenience.
Old school still works every time. You plug them in, hardwired.
Well, that's the problem. They don't even have a headphone jack on anything anymore. So you have to have all these different plugs to carry around with you everywhere.
Yeah.
And then to get one that actually doesn't break right at the tip, and then you got to wiggle the wire just to. Oh, I got one ear in. Oh, now we got both ears.
Yeah, all those little dingle-dangle adapter things.
Yay!
Hey.
We got Bluetooth in the ears. Now you can hear us. You're part of the conversation.
Yes. It's amazing.
Right, Jess.
Hello, ladies.
Good morning.
Top of the morning to you all.
Merry Christmas Eve.
What's the difference between the top of the morning and the bottom of the morning?
I would think that's late morning, right?
Bottom of the morning is 11:59.
Oh, is it?
And then we hit noon. I don't know.
Then you're at high noon.
Does it just matter if we're in baseball mode?
Oh, so
top of the morning and bottom of the morning?
So high noon versus bottom of the morning can be 1 minute, and then you go from bottom to top again.
So I'm going to be honest.
That's what she said.
I haven't heard anybody say bottom of the morning, but top of the morning has been a British way of greeting someone in the morning. Not modern day, old school.
Yes, this feels like that what was it, bridge explanation whenever we were going over the tram. And so I'm visiting Alina, and we're in a tram, and she looks over and we're next to a bridge, and she points at it and she goes, "Bridge."
But it's hilarious because we were really right in front of the bridge. It wasn't like far away. You need to look past, buildings and other attractions. It was like you can't not see the bridge. That's what made that extra
I turned around and I looked down. I said, "Water."
Was it troubled water?
Over the river.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Thanks.
Oh, what's in your cup this
Gonna be
morning?
punchy, man. I'm not nearly as far into my cup as I usually am when we do this.
What
matters.
is in your cup this morning?
Just plain old coffee. Cheers.
Well, I was
Water.
This
Non-troubled.
water. Tanya's got water.
Non-troubled.
Yeah. So
Lee,
I
what's in
was
your cup?
struggling significantly this morning. Didn't sleep last night, so I went to the gas station and got a First Form Energy.
Ooh.
It's done, so I've switched over to beet powder.
Oh, beet powder. You know, there's a little synchronicity because this is ginger powder.
Oh,
This is it can either wake you up and unclog your sinuses or grow hair in your chest.
Mm.
I'm hoping it's not the third.
maybe that's how the hair got there. I've eaten ginger root by itself, so
Yeah, that'll do it.
It's so good.
I really love the sponsorship pitch you had going on with the first one.
maybe we can get some advertising dollars.
I
Wink,
needed
wink.
to wake up.
Yeah.
Good thing I didn't say what I was going to.
What were you gonna?
It wouldn't help a sponsorship.
No, it wouldn't. I had an unhelpful thought too.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and melt our insides.
It was going to be about heart palpitations.
Oh yeah.
It's like, look at my irregular heartbeat. I am so awake.
You know what they say. You only live once.
And briefly with certain aids.
I was going to say, so do everything twice? I don't know what that means.
No use to play it small and safe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious what went through your brain whenever the topic was proposed, because Tanya and I realized that when we said stuck in a death loop, each of us had different thoughts of what that meant.
To be fair, your words were brain loop. So brain loop, I definitely took in a whole different direction. I took brain loop as just like I pick a topic, any topic, and I cannot seem to get out of this.
Oh, right. It's why do I keep doing this? That's how I thought about it. Right. We were
So,
in our exchanges yesterday. My first reaction when I heard the topic was like, absolutely yes. And I wish I couldn't, but I can relate. And how many people I work with and help who wish they could not relate as well. Yeah.
So
have you ever met anybody who can't relate?
I have met people and they do exist who incredibly quickly get themselves.
So I feel like we could probably talk about two different distinctions on what we're actually talking about. Because my idea was sometimes I say these things out loud before I fully think them through. It's like, oh wait, there are some subtle distinctions here in what we could be talking about. Whenever I was thinking like this eternal death loop that we get stuck in, I was thinking more specifically habit loops. We keep doing the same thing day in and day out, kind of like this Groundhog Day scenario where we keep getting up, we do the same routine, and are just stuck in this routine. We're stuck in habit. And after talking to Tanya this morning, realized that she went into thought loops, how we can get stuck on thought loops and how we just get these repeating thoughts. I'm thinking about a line from a song, repeating thoughts echoing through your head. And so there's two different distinctions, habits versus thoughts. And they're interrelated, but still different.
Yeah, and for sure, when he clarified habit, because when he said brain loop, I immediately went to thoughts. And when he clarified habit, I had a whole different list.
Yeah, I think both are habits. And I was in the brain loop concept as well. But they go together. I think they go together. I feel like when you're in a brain loop, your habits don't change much outside of that either. Like when you're in that brain loop, you still tend to show up in that same, like in a very structured way.
I think yes, and because
for sure,
sure, some of what I wrote, I have both of them next to each other, and for sure, some of what I wrote for brain loop could absolutely apply to habit loop, but I guess I don't think of the brain loop as such a recurring, like I almost feel like brain loop is in the moment, whereas the habit loop is, it occurred on Monday. I'm trying not to do it again, but 5 days later, I did it again. Whereas brain loop, I feel is a little more isolated when I'm thinking of it, as opposed to, okay, I'm working on this project and I just keep going to the same spot. And when I get to this spot, I'm stuck and I need to move from this spot. So what do I do to move past where I'm stuck? As opposed to the habit of, I can't quit eating this junk, or I can't quit these negative thought patterns, or, more recurring. That's how I had a distinguishing factor for both of them. Does that make sense?
It's interesting how many different ways there are to think about this. When I think about it, I think about the habit. It's the loop that we're in because it's been repeated. Our brain activity is almost inactive. It's almost like there isn't active thought when we are in a familiar, well-rehearsed loop of habit.
Agree.
So it's when you activate the brain and take action to change the loop of the habit, to move that habit, which is a bit different than I keep having this unhelpful thought. What now?
For me, the biggest distinction is between the thoughts and the actions. One is a thought loop. I'm thinking about, there's been times where I've been on the lawnmower and I'm riding around the yard mowing the grass, and I keep having this same thought go through my head, whatever it is at that particular moment. It's like what could have gone different in this scenario, and you just keep replaying the scenario back in your head again and again and again and again, and keep going, those motherfuckers. God damn it. What could I have done different? What should I have said in that moment? All those repeating thoughts keep popping up, and it's a cycling scenario, which for me is a completely different distinction on when we talk about habits. And habits are actions, and I just keep going to the same job and performing the same actions day in and day out. And I eat the same things, and I'm stuck in whatever that habit loop is. And in a way, it's almost kind of like the difference between subconscious thought and conscious thought. What do y'all think about the difference between that? Actions and thoughts, conscious thoughts versus subconscious thoughts. Like there's so many layers, so many levels to this.
I don't know. I feel like there's subconscious thoughts in both of those scenarios. Because, when your brain's on loop on the lawnmower, are you consciously thinking, I have to keep thinking this thought over and over again? And I think just like when you've formed a habit and that's an action, I don't know that you're necessarily even thinking before the action happens, because you've created that. I think they both have elements of both conscious and subconscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's if we are stuck in the loop of an unhelpful habit, there may be times that we're engaging in the habit. We consciously know it's unhelpful. Logically, we know that we don't want to continue doing it. And we continue doing it. And there may be a voice and a thought along the way as we're performing that unhelpful habit like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. I really should be doing this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the neural pathways, the practice, the repetition keeps us in that momentum, carrying out the very familiar next steps.
I'm getting the
So
idea of this feeling of being stuck, just being trapped in place. And the movie Groundhog Day comes to mind whenever I think about it. You wake up and the same thing repeats over and over again. And no matter how hard you try, you just feel like you're stuck in that moment, stuck in that particular loop.
Mhm.
So that's where my thoughts are going. Like, how do we bust out of that habit loop? Because when we start to bust the habit loop, when we start to change our actions, then our thoughts are more likely to be able to follow along. But then it's really weird in that it requires different thought
That's
first to start to create the new action.
That's
Yeah.
that's how I think of it. When I think of breaking out of habits, that, to use myself as an example, like, there are habits that I engage in that I know intellectually I don't want to be. It's
Mm-hmm.
not what I want. To change those is really difficult. So to change those, I have to go back and think through, what's the cue? What starts it all? So there's a book called The Power of Habit. I think it's somewhere back there on my shelf. The Power of Habit. And there's a concept of a cue, routine, reward loop over and over and over. There's a cue where we have a need for something. There's a reward that we meet that need with, right? There's a routine that we do, the action that we take to meet that need, and then we feel it a reward, right? Like, we feel anxious, so we, in the example of an unhelpful habit, we feel anxious and antsy, don't want to be alone with our thoughts. That's the cue. Reach for a candy bar. That's the routine, right? Reach for the dessert. Feel calmer. That's the reward. Over and over and over.
Yeah, I think we're in a chicken, which came first, chicken or the egg scenario. I think they're threaded together. I don't think you can have I think they're both habits, thoughts and actions. And I think depending on how you show up in the world, which one will move you quicker will depend on which one is harder for you. You know?
Mm.
So to bust out of them, there's a certain amount of activation energy. There's a certain amount of, you know what? I cannot keep doing this. If I keep doing this, shit's going to get bad. And it requires a fairly significant amount of effort to get started to make that change. But once the change has started, it actually gets quite a bit easier. Once the
that momentum is huge.
Yeah, when the new habit starts to form.
It starts with a disruptor, right?
Yeah.
So I'm
just reminded of a quote it was one of my very first days of yoga teacher training. My teacher was talking to us about being in balance and out of balance, just to put it simply. And she's like, to shift from out of balance to in balance takes a whole lot of effort, a lot of action, a lot of like awareness and like choice. But once you're in balance, to stay in balance is fairly easy. But it's also very easy to fall out of balance. So it's easier to shift from imbalance to out of balance than it is from out of balance to imbalance. So when you're on that imbalance wave, and I'm using that term, I mean, imbalance, whatever, but once you're in that wave, to really be mindful and make the effort to stay there really serves a greater purpose, because to fall out of it is so easy, but to get back into it is so hard.
Very true.
And that's a simple explanation of something complicated.
Yeah. It's just a quote that pops into my head when I can feel myself on the cusp sometimes. Like I'm in balance and there's like this thing that's tempting me. And I'm like, oh, I've been so good for so long. Just one little choice won't matter. And then damn if it doesn't derail me more often than not. I'm like, shit, now I have all this effort again, which remembering that and putting some like actual, like planting it in my brain to remind me that like I did this before and it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. So know your patterns is really a good thing. Like that quote, I love that pops in for me. Cause I remember when she said it, I was like, really? And then it was like, oh yeah, I tested that theory. It's true.
Once you're in balance, I will add to that, it's not that difficult to then step back out of it.
That's the point.
Yeah. It's amazing how quickly and easily one can get right back out of it. And then, and then take the effort to, right? There's efforting involved in getting back into it. Often.
As
I'll add a caveat. There's effort in staying in it.
There is.
Yeah.
There's way more effort to staying in balance and getting yourself in balance and staying in balance than there is to the out of balance. Because like you said,
oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, just like you said, the out of balance, it's as simple as, well, if I just grab this candy bar or, do these drugs or not exercise or whatever, put the vice in, like, that's the easy thing.
Yeah, it's coping mechanisms, right? That's what we're talking about. How do we cope with uncomfortable things? Almost said discomfortable because English and whatnot. So what you got, Alina?
I will add another thing to it that feels like a caveat to all the things that we're talking about, to what feels hard. When something is at stake that is so important and urgent, the adrenaline, there's a drive within us when the goal is so clear and compelling. To use an extreme example, like if a parent is obese to the point where their heart is not working and they have young children, and the doctor says, if you want to see your children grow up, you will never touch XYZ. You will never do ABC, right? While they're in a hospital, right? Hooked up to lines, about to die. That may be enough of a shock, enough of a motivation. They may have suffered enough that they'll say, oh, now it's become really easy right now. This is the easiest thing I've ever done. I don't want to see those. I don't want to see those foods anymore. I don't want to take those actions anymore because I see my young children's faces, and boy, do I feel motivated now. So that is a caveat to immediate habit change. I watched it happen with my AP physics teacher in high school who had 4 children. He suffered a heart attack in the supply closet of our classroom. During the school day, while he was teaching, he felt something was wrong and he went in the back. He suffered a heart attack and he was out for a couple of months. And when he came back, he looked transformed and he continued to transform.
I'll be damned.
And it was that.
I was wondering who was in that closet with him.
I have seen and heard stories like that, but I've also seen the ones that even faced with, you're going to die if you keep doing this, where that's not motivation enough. Like even with, you have people who love you, and so I've seen both of those scenarios play out. One where they got the motivation and they were like, well, hell yeah, I want to be here for my kids. And I've seen others where it wasn't that simple.
Yeah, and I think we need to be careful with, maybe not, I don't know how to say this exactly, but what's coming in is, like, I'm just thinking about like kids, right? If somebody doesn't choose it, like I'm thinking about my grandfather who was an alcoholic, and family members would write him a letter and he would stop for a short while, but he would always go back. It wasn't because he didn't love us. It wasn't because we weren't enough. It was because he had his wounds that were, he had his own stuff and it wasn't about us. And so just because someone chooses not to choose life or not to choose you doesn't mean it's about you. And I think it's really important to make sure that that's clear, because in my family, it was not true that, I mean, it could have been death and nobody cared. I was just like, yeah, I'm not making that choice. Several of my family members made choices like that. And it wasn't because they didn't love anyone else in the family. It's because they had their own stuff and there was nothing that was enough. Death wasn't enough.
Yep.
I'm so glad that you said that. I'm so glad that you added the caveat to the caveat. That is so important.
To have that reason to want to change that is greater than the pain that you're experiencing, the pain that you're in. Because if the pain is not greater than the want to, like, or if the want to isn't greater than the pain, so on and so forth, this makes it very, very difficult to make the changes, because there is that extra activation energy I'm talking about to start to make the changes. And then there's also the fear of the unknown, because if I'm in this pattern, I know this pattern. This is the enemy I know. And if we change and we start doing something different, now all of a sudden that's kind of scary, because I'm not sure what lies in different. So I'm more comfortable to stay with the enemy I know than to start to change and go into a place that is unfamiliar, that is uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exactly, the coping mechanism is what gives you comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And stopping that puts you into discomfort.
Yeah,
I think it's so interesting. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that in almost every single case, there is a need to go a couple of steps backwards before you can start to move forwards again. Like, say, if the coping mechanism is alcohol, and in my case, I went through that for quite a bit. To quit required that I went through a very, very difficult stage of withdrawals and not having the coping mechanism, and starting to try to learn how to cope without it was very difficult. So it required a couple of steps backwards to then start moving forwards again. So that, am I going to be able to deal with what shows up whenever I go backwards? Can I deal with the withdrawals? Can I deal with the not having my coping mechanism, my piece of comfort that helps me get through the day? For instance, how am I going to function without my caffeine? How am I going to be productive without my caffeine? And if I'm not productive, what's going to happen to me? If I go 2 weeks of not being productive, how far behind am I going to get? And am I going to be so unokay if I let go of that caffeine? Like, this is actually something I'm dealing with right now. Having too much caffeine, keeping me super anxious, so on and so forth. And then it's like, oh, but I'm not okay if I quit the caffeine because I need to be productive. All right. There's this need. So there's a lot of times there's conflicting desires here that we're talking about, conflicting priorities. I want to improve my health. I want to do the work necessary to make more money. I want to create this book, whatever it is, right? I do want that, but right, I don't know if I can deal with, like, I don't want to be uncomfortable. I want to feel safe. I want, like, conflicting interest, right?
I think this topic in particular reveals the human layers, because I think it's such a personal journey. Everyone has different motivators. Some people don't even have a motivator that exists that will make the shift. They're good with where they're at, and it maybe affects everyone around them, but they don't care. It doesn't, like they don't even know it. Maybe. I'm not saying they don't care. I'm saying, and so I just think it's fascinating to think about, like, do you need 2 steps back? Are you the person who just quits cold turkey of whatever that habit is? And then, like, once you decide, and it just takes you a long time to get to that decision point. And where does that come from? And I think for everyone, it's so personal and different. The other thing I keep thinking about as we're talking about this is we haven't, like, talked about the fact that when you make the choice and you decide to shift, at some point along that way, there's a pivot that happens where you recognize, like, gosh, my life was so much harder before. but like, if you'd never get that awareness, I mean, I went for 35 years with never understanding that if I just did some really hard work to break some habits and to change my thought patterns and to make my mind not so damn mean to myself, that my life would actually be easier, like long-term easier. It brings an ease into my life that didn't exist before. So like my life required so much effort and energy and pain before I decided to do what I thought was the hardest thing that would cause the most pain. And in reality, it was challenging and hard and painful, sure, but the other side of it created ease, which then just created a desire for more ease, which meant I was more willing to do the work. But if you've never done work to the place where you actually get to take a breath and feel the ease, it's really hard. Like, I don't think my grandfather ever found ease, and I think he didn't believe it was possible. And so he made different choices. And I think for me, my life experience, because I witnessed that, I was like, not going down that road. I want something different for myself and my family. And so that inspired me in a new and different way. So for me, like 2 steps backwards is scary because it means I might snowball backwards into what my grandfather chose. Whereas for you, 2 steps backwards was I got to dance and play with this and see how it plays out. So I just think it's so fascinating how layered we are and how it's so different for all of us.
Yeah. I'm reminded of the J curve, and that like I drew a reverse J curve here. That's the amount of effort it takes to run our life. So it starts off at a medium high level. This is how much effort it takes to stay where I am, medium high. And then there's a high amount of effort to start the change. But once the change is made, it drops down to where that effort drops much, much lower to continue leading a life that's of a better quality. So it's so worth it to put that little bit of extra effort in to start to make those changes, because then in the long run, life gets significantly easier. Or if we look at the quality of our life, this is going to be a real J curve. Quality of our life is somewhat low. We start to make the changes. The quality of our life actually can go down to start with. But then once we get past that J curve, it then comes right back up to where our quality of life ends up being greater after making the changes.
I see food as a great example for what you just said, which is like when you allow the ultra processed stuff in your life and you decide I'm gonna kick that habit, and even not necessarily ultra processed, but maybe you just overdo it on the sugar or the flour, the whatever. And you start going into, okay, I'm going to eat clean, even if it's just like an 80% clean, 20% junk. It's hard at first. And you're going to go into that decline and you don't know if you can do it, especially for people who eat a lot of processed food. But then once you eliminate that, once you stop putting in so much sugar and so many things that are just really destroying your body, and you get used to eating more vegetables, more, protein from animal sources or even plant protein, you start to go up and it becomes easier. Not only does it become easier, but the other stuff is actually, it tastes like shit now. Like you don't crave it. You don't want it. But it's also so easy to be on vacation and, oh, we've been driving for 10 hours. We gotta get something to eat. What are we going to do to stop and reintroduce it or whatever? I don't know. That's kind of the cycle that went through my head in a simple way when you were describing that. I feel like you can see it so clearly with food.
Yeah, those detoxes, it's like they hit you hard, and then it's like, oh wow, I didn't know this was possible. Once you get over that hard,
that's right.
I feel amazing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what if your future self that was over that hump could come back and tell you, this could be easy? Like, this pain, the payoff is so worth it. It's so worth it. If you can have a conversation with your present, before the hump and over the hump self. I'm thinking about examples in the workplace. And I'm thinking about examples of kind of stepping on yourself and compromising yourself, being a yes person, right? Never saying no, not rejecting like any proposals, any projects that are dropped on your plate. Yes, absolutely. I can do it. I can work the weekend. Sure, no problem. I'll cancel dinner with my partner. You got it. This is important. Over and over and over, saying no to yourself to say yes to everybody else. That's the turtle asshole. And over time, it starts to get really heavy. And when you've had enough, when you start discovering, and it feels so scary and risky to stick your head out of the shell, like, what would happen if I actually said no? What would happen if I said a modified no, right? You offer a modified no, can't do it today. How about next Tuesday, right? A negotiation of some sort where you're getting some balance in your day and honoring yourself a little bit instead of being, a doormat. Life can become a lot easier because then you become visible to others, right? When you become a person who's capable of drawing boundaries and saying no, others may respect that person more. And the assignments that they then get as a result of saying no may be at a higher level, more interesting, higher exposure. So it can get easier. There is an elegance that's possible where it's worth it. But there's going to be discomfort first. I think that's the common thread of what we're talking about. So you're not going to get there a lot of the time without discomfort.
Yes, indeed. Feels like a good place to go into the round table. How y'all feeling about it?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. All right, then.
Let's do it.
All right. So normally it's Alina, Michelle, me. We have Tanya here today. How do y'all want to order this thing?
I think our guest of honor goes first.
Roy
Yeah.
Jess. All right, you're on the spot there, dear.
Oh my.
I hope you like that hot seat. Do you like the hot seat?
Sometimes.
Wiggle around on it, see how it feels.
Yeah, it's good. So I wrote down several things, and kind of like I was saying to Michelle earlier, I do feel like some of my original thought in this does tie in. But I think my number one is going to be make a conscious effort to think about the problem habit. And not just when it's happening, but also prior to when it comes up. So more of a, I do this, and it also hand in hand with that is make a plan. This is what I'm doing. When this comes up for me again, I will blank. Because I think if you don't think about it outside of when the problem is happening, it's easier to stay stuck.
Reminds me of something I picked up in a course one time. They call it writing the algorithm of your life. It's basically if blank, then blank. If this happens, then I will do this in response. And actually writing that algorithm out and going through all your different habits and starting to say, if blank, then blank. So just to make that an exercise that somebody can actually take and apply, that would be the thing to do. Write it out in your journal. If, then. And I'm not going to say it again because I feel like I just said it like a dozen times in a row. I'm sorry. All right, Alina, what you got? It better be good. You better not disappoint me.
It all comes down to this,
Yes.
It's all riding on this one thing. One is to establish the pattern. So understand yourself, create that awareness. What starts it? What do you do about it? What happens afterwards? you start documenting that. You take the subjectivity out of it. You take the like the emotion of the moment out of it, and you start to observe yourself objectively. You know, maybe it's a similar trigger that takes place. Maybe you address it in a couple unhelpful ways. Maybe it isn't the same thing that you do every time. So that's self-awareness, and establishing the pattern would be the first thing.
Number 1. I'm going to start every single 1, 2, and 3 with the same word, and that's compassion. Because I think when we're stuck in a habit, whether it be a habit, physical habit, or a thought loop, we tend to beat up on ourselves. So offer yourself self-compassion first. And then I'm thinking about being stuck in habits and patterns, and do novelty. Novelty is huge. Just pick one thing to do different. But do that intentionally, do it mindfully. So intentionally do something different. When you're really wanting to be in the habit, pick something different. Just do one thing outside of the way you would normally do it. Even as simple as, like, I normally grab the pickle jar with my right hand. Today, I'm going to grab it with my left. I mean, it doesn't have to be massive, just a simple thing, but compassion and novelty.
Cool. Almost feel like adding a little bit of a challenge in there and changing up my number 1. But I won't. I'm gonna stick to my number 1. All right. So number 1 for me is going to be get clear on the deepest desires behind your wants. Whenever you really start to link your deep desires, what you're truly craving on the inside, to what it is you want to change, what it is that you want, it makes it far easier to find inspiration to get moving rather than using desperation. Desperation is kind of this fear motivated place that it can be okay for activation energy. Fear based motivation can work fairly well, but it doesn't work long term. If we actually find that inspiration and start to look at what we really want to create in our lives, it can create energy that it has a different feel to it. It's easier to stick to it whenever you actually want to do things rather than trying to force yourself to change. For instance, if it's I want to get out of this job that's sucking the life out of me so I can create a lifestyle that supports what I want to have. It's like, okay, let's get clear on what that lifestyle really is. What does it look like? Make it so real that then it's almost becomes reality. And then you get to live into that dream rather than, oh, I just don't want this job. Like, I don't want this job isn't going to be strong enough energy most of the time to make that change. But if this is the lifestyle, I can already feel this new lifestyle of me not being chained to my desk and doing work that matters to me. Whenever that becomes real in your mind, it creates that inspiration energy that makes you want to get up and start to move rather than feeling forced. So, and that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, Forrest.
That's all I have to say about that.
Instead of the negative being the motivator, it's the positive. It's not, I don't want to do this anymore. It shifts to, this is what I want to do.
And for over and out.
I like it a lot.
Tanya, you're next.
Number 2? I think my big number 2 is you have to utilize a partner. If you truly have a thought loop or have that is,
Hey, hang on just a second, Tanya.
I'm losing her.
Is she
Your
freezing for
internet.
y'all too?
Oh.
Yeah.
Is it better?
It's almost back.
How about now?
Freaking Starlink,
hear
I
you now.
swear. We should probably
I know.
pay Elon more so we can actually make this thing work properly, huh?
Sadly, this is still better than anything else we've ever had.
You know, the joys of living in the country. So anyway, we got to start all over because you left off at find a partner.
Okay. So I feel like what we are discussing here is not just a simple, I need to grab the pickle jar with my right hand instead of my left hand. If we're talking about really getting out of things that we find ourselves stuck in, thought patterns, actual habits, physical habits, I think utilizing a partner in some way is the absolute best way to help break that habit. And it might be as simple as, hey, I don't realize I'm doing this. So I need you to point out, when I'm falling into a negative attitude, or when I'm doing the thing that I said I wasn't going to do. Am I subconsciously grabbing something from the candy jar? I need you to tell me put that down. Is a partner going to be the thing that's going to fix everything? No, because ultimately it's on you to stick with your plan to break the habit. But I think having someone there to support you through it is very important.
Snap. All right. Number 2, replace, don't just remove. So instead of pure deprivation, what may feel like deprivation that creates an empty space, replace it with something that is aligned with what you want. So in food cravings, it's instead of the thing that you want to eat less of, focus on what you want more of, right? Add something that feels good. That's number 2.
That's reminded me of whenever I was quitting alcohol, I ended up replacing it with kombucha mushroom tea.
Mm.
On second thought, that may not have been such a great idea. My poor belly swole up, but anyway, the carbonation, the fizziness helped out pretty fair amount with soothing that craving.
Mm.
All right, I quit. Go ahead, Michelle.
Number
There
two.
you-
My number
there
2
you-
is a 3-parter.
Ooh.
I know. I can skip number 3 if this is breaking the rules. I'm breaking the rules today. Compassion again, and I'm starting with compassion because I feel like I'm speaking to the people who are so frozen and stuck that they don't honestly have capacity for much else. It might be you only have the capacity to grab something with your left hand instead of your right, or to like just stay where you are without movement instead of repeating the same habit. And so my number 3 comes from my psychologist friend, Dr. Kat Kronemeyer. I also learned it in the movie Stutz, surprisingly. And it is move your physical state, like change your physical state. So if you're sitting, stand. If you can do a whole workout, great, but you're probably not there. If you're sitting, stand. If you're, do something to move your body. Spend time in person with a trusted friend if you can. If not in person, at least phone a trusted friend, and then write for no purpose, not just write. Get your thoughts out of your head. Don't go back and read it. You're just writing. My other suggestion of that is if you absolutely haven't, like just writing repulses you, be creative in some way. But when you're stuck, that compassion is so important. And when you don't have capacity for much, sometimes you just need a recipe. Kat and I call them recipes, EASE. Like we're just creating some sort of ease to move something for you. That's it. 1, 2, 3. And start with 1. You might never get to 2 today. You might just be at 1 today. Move your body. That's it.
Nice. I like that. So my number 2 is find out what's in the way. And because this is number 2, I feel like making a constipation joke right now. Like something stuck. What's in the way? Oh, I'm seeing the grimaces.
Ooh.
Oh, we're talking about the Nirvana song. There's something in the way. So anyway, back to it. So what's in the way? Many times it's our thoughts. Like I don't have the resources. I don't have what it takes. I'm just stuck. Don't have the energy. Something's going to be in the way. And so, or we can go right into what I mentioned briefly earlier. There's a conflicting interest. So getting very, very clear on what's in the way allows us to start to remove that piece of resistance, to unclog that clog, to start to create that momentum to move us forward. It's actually just happened to me recently where I've been stuck in this death loop of I have to create my business and I need to make sure that it's profitable. And I've been so focused on that stuff around my house is starting to fall apart. And vehicles are breaking. We had a hayfield was cut nearby our house, and every time that happens, it opens up the grand opportunity for rats. Because they live in those fields. As soon as they cut those fields down, they don't have a home. They find the closest, most comfortable home for them. Immediately, we had a huge family of rats that tore up the bottom of our house. I've been so focused on this business that the thought of doing anything else is a conflicting interest. And then I started to realize, oh no, because my brain knows in the back that I need to be taking care of the household, I wasn't able to work on the business. So there's this conflict going on in my brain of, I want to do this, I need to do this, and it was allowing me to do neither. So whenever I got very, very clear, like that was my resistance, was that conflict in my brain. When I got clear on what that resistance was, it was like, okay, now I'm going to start to plan out. I can do what I need to do, even though I don't want to do it. And it allows my brain to open up to start to focus on what I want to do too, and that's build the business. But before I got clear on what that resistance was, I was stuck in a loop of, I sit down behind my desk, I'm not focusing, I'm not getting anything done. And then I had a discussion with Michelle one day. I was like, oh, that's what's going on. I have this conflict going on in my brain. And once I realized that, it was enough to remove that resistance. Now I'm getting stuff done in both areas. So that's it. Get clear on what that resistance is so we can unclog that clog and get that number 2 flowing.
I remember that day. Can I say what we had talked about saying that day? We never circled back to it.
Yeah. You have my permission.
Thank you. We talked about how sometimes just a conversation with a friend, like we're both coaches, but neither one of us were coaching that day. We weren't trying to fix anything. We were just talking, like two people who care about each other. We're just talking about life. And you had an aha moment. It wasn't about us being with certain hats on. We were just being friends. And it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
See, utilize a partner.
I'm glad you got your validation there, darling.
I did.
How's it feel?
I love being validated.
All right, then.
Thank you.
Let's start to bring it home there, dear.
Okay. So, oddly enough, Alina and Michelle, you both kind of, like I had written variations of what y'all both said as well. So I'm going to kind of regroup really quickly, in that I think one thing that is helpful just to me is when I am stuck in a loop to make sure I do more of being out in nature and in a way that is good for my health. So oftentimes when I'm at my worst, I realize it's when Lee and I are not taking our regular walks around the yard. If it's because of the weather or all the vampires that live out here and just won't die this year, mosquitoes. I definitely get stuck in mental loops way worse when I'm not just outside, but specifically outside and moving my body, as you mentioned, Michelle, in some sort of way. I'm less likely to fall into bad habits when I am both moving my body and being out in nature. So I think that will be my number 3.
Like it. My number 3 is forgive and flex. So forgive yourself when you do it inelegantly, when you do it partially, when you do it not as you planned. Continue forgiving yourself over and over. And flex. So if you had an idea of how you were going to go about making that change to get out of that loop, if you do it a little differently, give yourself permission to do it a little differently, to do it later in the day, to do it not the way that you designed, but it is walking toward the goal that you want. Leave room. It's not an all or nothing. When we get into an all or nothing mindset, that is precisely how we discourage ourselves from making progress. That's number 3.
Yeah, you make it sound
That's
like
a great point.
Yeah, getting stuck on perfection is what you make it sound like. Like if it doesn't look like the picture I have in my head, then it's not okay. But it's actually okay to make messy, nasty steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mess up. That means that you're learning.
Roy,
Good job. Go make mistakes. You're just learning how something does or doesn't work, right? You're iterating. Great.
Experiments.
Number 3. This one is probably requires a little bit more capacity. Compassion, observation, radical acceptance of the possibility, likelihood that you're simply fighting against yourself, and owning that. We tend to like to blame the external world and wait for someone to come rescue us when we're in that state. And if we can observe with compassion and recognize that we're fighting against ourselves, we're fighting with ourselves, like we are the one we're fighting, and to radically accept the fact that we have to own it. And we can use our external resources. In fact, go for your external resources, but ultimately they're not your scapegoats. They're not your saviors. They're not your rescuers. You get to choose how you engage. And when you decide that you are going to own it from a place of observation and compassion, so many things change. Ask yourself if you have the capacity first, because sometimes we just don't. But when you're in that place where you're in that, like, God damn it, I have to do something. I'm over this and I'm ready to do something big. This is big. Owning it and recognizing that you get to love yourself through it. And you're going to love and hate yourself at the same time. At least that's how it works for me and pretty much everyone I've ever talked to. It's really powerful, but don't do that alone. And not but, and it's powerful, and don't do that alone. Lean in, but fucking own it. You are doing this. You. Compassion.
That one-
Compassion.
That one hit me hard in the gut, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Like, yes, like I kind of, I'm feeling that one. I'm feeling that one hard.
Is
If
that
I
one
can
of those?
support you in any way, let me know. Seriously.
Is that one of those fuck you, thank you moments?
I mean, something like that.
Oh,
I feel like there's so much truth to what you just said. And it was said in a very beautiful way. I mean, I think all the points so far have been great, but that one just, I don't know, it hit me a little different. And I think maybe it hit me different because that's one that maybe isn't realized as much, but so important.
it hits you in your spot.
Yeah.
Very good.
Hit me right in the spot.
All right, I'm gonna drive this thing home.
Tough act to follow.
Yeah.
Oh,
For me, it's gonna be
competition.
This one's a big one for me, and that's swallow your pride. Because for me, it's like it's almost like I feel this sense of self-importance whenever I'm the guy that does the thing, and I'm not doing it with help because, oh, look at me, I'm a hero. And every time that I've gotten to the worst, and then I finally went, fuck, I can't do this on my own, and then ask somebody for help, that's whenever the change started to finally happen. And there's been plenty of times where I've asked for help and the help was counterproductive, ended up taking me down the wrong direction. So then I still have this bit inside of me is like, if I ask for help, I'm just going to get fucked. For instance, when I was having a lot of health issues, I went to probably half a dozen doctors who just kept fucking me harder and harder and harder until finally one day I heard this guy on a podcast. His name is John Mitchell. And after listening to him, he's starting to talk about how doctors can make you feel like you're crazy and so on and so forth. Just hearing him talk, I was like, my God, I have to reach out to this guy. And I knew it. And I waited for months to do it because I was expecting to get screwed again. But when I finally did, and the guy was able to help me in ways that was absolutely phenomenal. And even after going through that experience, I was having health issues again here recently. And I was afraid that I couldn't pay him, so I didn't reach out to him. Like, fuck, man. Finally, after going through it deep enough, it's like, all right, gotta swallow my pride. Just reach out to him, talk to him. And I did. And sure enough, as soon as I did, now all of a sudden the changes are starting to happen that I needed to happen to get my health back on track again. So reaching out and asking for that help and not stopping at just one particular no, or not stopping with one opinion, and keep going until you get the help that you actually really need. Be it from a friend, having that conversation, from a professional who knows what they're doing. And this is like, when it comes to reaching out for help, this is what we do. All the four of us in this room do really, really well as coaches. This is probably the number one problem we help solve as coaches is busting these habit loops and creating new habits so then we can create a future that we want to live into. And people people get stuck on, well, I don't have enough money to pay for a coach or so on and so forth. Yes, there are some freaking quack coaches out there too. And the people that Michelle helped, I might not be able to help. and vice versa, right? So if you find the person that's right for you, then it can make a significant difference in how on the results you get. Alina can work with somebody in a corporate environment that I couldn't do that. So reach out to different people and finally find that one person that is just like, really resonates with you and can help. And that can make all the difference in the world. So, but it requires swallowing that pride and not trying to, like, I'm a DIYer and I'll DIY myself to death.
Mhm.
So
He almost did.
yeah, there's trust issues in there. So
I was going to
yeah.
say, I love that you gave a shout out to someone that helped you. And I'm like, I just feel like it would be kind of fun to go around and maybe everybody give a shout out to someone who like changed their life. I don't know if that's helpful for people or not, but like for me, it surprised me. I didn't expect it. I went into a community super skeptical. I was like, well, I'm going to see what happens, see if I like this. And it turned out to be like Tanya Boyganzon of Devanati Yoga changed my freaking life on a level that I'm here today talking with you guys, saying things that I didn't even know existed, 13 years ago. And it wasn't just Tanya, it was her community and the experts she brought in and the people I met because of her. And it's like, I give Tanya a lot of like props and I will forever be grateful and she knows it.
Yeah.
And it's not just about her, which is like, again, back to your point for more validation, Tanya. People connecting, it's so important. And I didn't mean that to sound like a plug. I just like it came from out of nowhere for me. I wasn't going in looking for healing. I was going in looking for something new and fun for myself. And it turned into something I never could have imagined. At the perfect time in my life when I uncovered things that I didn't know existed and needed that support. It was like a godsend. It's like, thank you for putting me in the right place at the right time with the right people.
Yeah. Say her name slower for me. And her
Tanya Boyganzon.
What's her organization?
Devanati Yoga. I think it's just devanatiyoga.com. She's amazing.
Cool.
Yeah. I just would love to hear, like, I know you all have people like that.
Yeah.
Like, where, maybe it wasn't a surprise. Maybe you leaned in, you knew right away, I want to do this work. I know this is my person. And then it was great. I don't know. It's different for everyone.
Yeah, I have a collection of people, but as far as the health issues are concerned, John Mitchell, PA, he's from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a functional medicine doctor. Phenomenal guy.
Are you Tanya and Alina, are you willing to share? Do you have that you're comfortable sharing or not so much?
It's been a collection of folks for me that have made a big difference. There have actually been healers who have since passed on, who were instrumental and opened my world, opened my eyes to possibilities I wouldn't have possibly seen if I kept doing it on my own. And Lee's last, point, the closer, I absolutely resonates with me. It's this idea of like, I'm doing it all by myself. And it's a constant reminder. And we talk about it on this podcast, just about every episode, the value of community and not doing it alone, like not waiting until you're just about to break down to get help, right? To get someone to journey with you. Like there is an easy button that's possibly available to you, like today. So for me, the people that have opened my eyes, there's really been a collection of those folks. There were the healers that have since passed away that were incredible. There was the very first coach that I had worked with. Rob Schwartz is his name, and he's based in New York, and opened my eyes to a world of those possibilities. And having gone to therapy, for me, I realized like, oh, this is actually, there was tremendous impact made in a session that I had not experienced with a therapist that I had seen. There was also polarity therapy I've had done with a lady named Monu, who's incredible, who like opened up awareness about my own body that I just wouldn't have had ever without her. Yeah. Wait, one more. The Institute of Core Energetics is a big one. That's a big one. Opened up a whole world of what's possible and added new tools to my toolkit, how to work with people.
I see you welling up with something over there, dear. What you got?
Well, I feel like mine's just kind of non-conventional, but I hate you so much. Probably two people come to mind. And really, I don't know that the person who has changed my life the most has definitely just been Lee. Even before before he was a coach. The positivity that he's brought into my life by being him, I wouldn't be here today without him, because of his genuineness and his authenticity and his ability to really save me from myself. And I feel like that's a different direction than y'all took, but it's the truth that as far as the biggest impact and positive changes in my life. Sorry, I'm not a pretty crier. But that's where they started.
I think you're a beautiful crier. That was beautiful.
More validation, thank you.
So beautiful.
Validation from this corner of the screen as well, Tanya.
I think being moved to tears for profound life changes is a beautiful thing. It's gratitude. It's love. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Amen. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. And the other person came a little later, and that would be our former and retired priest, Father Vaughn, just because I feel like he was one of the most he's the example, in my opinion, of what a religious or holy person should be. One of the most authentic people especially with religious orders, or however you may want to say, just a genuinely lovely soul who I think has given so much to people in the community and his church. And so that's definitely a whole different road than Lee. But yeah, so Lee was definitely the first one, though, because I could see a very different trajectory for myself had he not been placed in my life at the time he was. And I'm going to shut up now.
Please don't. Don't shut up.
I feel like this was one of those times for me to say something would fuck it up.
It's okay to just receive.
Yes, maybe you should just receive.
And you got it on video.
Yes, indeed.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, I think that's your anniversary present.
It is Christmas
So
Eve
beautiful.
today, so maybe it's a Christmas present. Huh?
It's a Christmas present.
Yeah. All right, then. Well, I feel like that's a beautiful place to say, see ya.
Merry Christmas Eve, everyone.
Merry Christmas Eve. I know our audience won't see it until the new year, but Merry Christmas in the past, y'all. And Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year.
And all the things.
Oh, a lot of love in this room. I like it.
Yeah.
Signing off.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to That's a Great Point with Alina Doran, Michelle Aalbers, and Lee Smart. To find out more about how we can serve you, check out our links in the show description. Thanks for playing along.